Hey there, welcome to School of Emo, the podcast where we dive into the world of emo, pop punk, and everything in between. If you've ever found yourself in your car screaming the lyrics to Taking Back Sunday, wearing way too much eyeliner in the early 2000s, adding a buckle or a chain to every outfit you've put on, you are in the right place. I'm Erin Judge, and each week I will be your fellow student, guiding you through the music, the culture, and the history that shaped an entire generation of angsty teens. I am not the teacher of this school. I am a fellow student, here to learn alongside you and from you. Together, we will cover a lot of information that doesn't really matter, but will remind us of the days of stalking MySpace channels and getting lost in chat rooms. So connect your dial-up, turn on your webcam, and let's go to School of Emo. Welcome back to School of Emo. Today you are in my office. As I mentioned, I work as a dietitian full-time, but home office. Wanted to just do a quick video. I had not planned to do this as an episode, but decided, you know what, let's talk about it. Let's be open, with these show recaps. And while it seems a little controversial, I think it's important to talk about, and not something I'm seeing many people discuss fully. And that is the brand new tour. So I was not planning on going. I did not try to buy tickets. They came to Nashville, and Jesse Lacey did his own like acoustic kind of solo night in Nashville. And then they did, I think, one of their first, maybe not even for the tour, like they just did like a show, but they had a show here. And we did not try to go, didn't really look into resale tickets or anything like that. But with the rise of the tour and doing the episode a few back where I did a deep dive into brand new, I started listening to a lot of their music again and just remembered how incredible some of those lyrics were, and deeply emotional and very much emo forward. A lot of their music is, because I just haven't listened to it in so long. And so I've been listening to some of their music over the last month or so. And I was browsing randomly, I think 2 weeks ago. I happened to be looking at Ticketmaster, and I was just curious. It's like, where are they? Where are they going? We're traveling a lot this summer, and so it's like, okay, maybe we'll be somewhere where they are, and like that could be interesting. Like, I'm very intrigued. I think with the Pierce the Veil tour right now, we are seeing a lot of people share their experiences of the show, and with brand new, I'm not seeing, and maybe it's just my algorithm of socials. I think a lot of people are nervous to share because the online backlash that people are getting when they say anything about brand new currently. But I haven't seen a lot of clips and recaps of the show beyond just little clips of, one song or them singing. And there's just not a lot of discourse around like what's going on with the show. And it seems very secretive, even from brand new, right? They have their social media that they put up, and they have just the one post of the tour. They announced it. No one's really saying anything. There's nothing really, no discourse around Jesse Lacey. They're really not talking about the break that they took. Like, it just feels very mysterious. And so I was just curious. My curiosity got to me. And I happened to see that they were going to be in Atlanta, and tickets for resale were only $10, which is unheard of. Right. And this was about 2 weeks out from the show. It wasn't the day of the show. And my husband and I would already planned on being in New York the week before, but we were technically free. You can drive to Atlanta from Nashville. And so I was like, you know what? $20. I think I paid $22 after fees. Let's do it. I'm curious. Let's grab tickets 1 minute to make sure that they weren't a scam. But even if they were, I'm only out $22. So we bought the tickets, and then we decided to do a weekend in Atlanta. That's something that we've been wanting to do, because we just never get down there and it's so close. So we decided to go to Atlanta for the weekend and go to the show. And I wasn't going to cover it, so I didn't really take a lot of video clips or anything. I didn't take a lot of notes or anything during the show. But now that we're back, and after being there again and kind of processing through how little I'm seeing online from other people, I'm not seeking it out again, so maybe it exists, but I thought it'd be interesting to talk about the tour, talk about the show, and some of the kind of thoughts, I guess, that I have around it. So I, like many people, I think that there's a lot of people who are on the ends of the spectrum of some people who are very much, we will never support brand new again, never support anything that Jesse Lacey is a part of. And if you do, they're terrible. Those are the people that we definitely see online. When they announced the tour, like even the venue in Nashville that hosted it here, like they didn't share about it at all. Like it was just barely there. They didn't put it on their shows coming this month, all those types of posts. Like it was very much hidden. They wouldn't share it. One of the promoter groups here in Nashville called Nashville is the Reason, they promoted or shared the Jesse Lacey kind of acoustic night thing, whatever that was. And people were so frustrated and, just flooded the comments with how terrible of a person that he is and how terrible everybody is for going and how terrible that this group is for supporting it and all those things. So online, we see the end of that spectrum for sure. We also see, I think, with the tour starting, the other side of the spectrum, which are the people commenting back to the people on the one side of the spectrum, which is the people who are like, I don't care at all. I just want to listen to the music. So very much like kind of trying to be head in the sand neutral, like who cares? It doesn't matter, whatever. And then even some people like justifying the actions of Jesse Lacey in the past. And if you're not for sure, like you have no idea what I'm talking about, go to our recap episode on Brand New, because I get into all those controversies there. You can also Google it, but I go through it a little bit more of like the history of what all's been going on. But we're seeing both online. But I think that the reality is that a lot of people are kind of in the middle, where I stand too, where it's like, I obviously am not very supportive of Jesse Lacey's past and the things that he did. I also do really love their music and the lyrics. And I think you can see how he was deeply troubled, maybe some of his own trauma in his lyrics, and how much he was trying to kind of figure out his own life and his own self. Like I think people should have listened to the lyrics and offered help and support a little bit more because it's very clear that there was a lot going on like internally in that dialogue. I've never seen them live though. So I didn't know like, well, how did that present on stage, or like, what were the conversations around that? Or, they were always pretty private and didn't do a lot of interviews, and even now aren't doing much. And so it's just very interesting. So was curious, loved the music, and decided, we're going to go. The tickets had already been bought. Justify that, I guess. We bought them resale for less than what the person, I guess, who had originally bought them, maybe bought them for. And they were playing at an outdoor amphitheater, the Synovus Amphitheater in Atlanta, kind of outside of Buckhead area, between that and downtown. So in a decent spot in Atlanta. Parking was easy. And we always talk about the venue first. It had been raining most of the day. I was a little bit nervous about that, but it didn't rain like once we were actually there. But parking is kind of surrounding. There's multiple lots surrounding the amphitheater. It's about $30, I think, per lot. It's kind of pricey. There's also a park nearby. I don't know if you could just park at the park and walk. It seems like a lot of people did that. It wasn't that far. We didn't do that. We just parked in one of the lots and then a short walk, up the hill to the amphitheater. We were on the left orchestra side, which is where we entered. So the bigger merch tents and like the concessions and the bathrooms, they're sort of in between like the left orchestra side and the stage. You're looking down at the stage. And so we were on that side, and they did have a bit of a covering. I think that we were in row T. We were kind of at the very edge of the covering awning kind of over us, which I think maybe they put lights or something up at the top. So that was really good. It actually worked out in our favor, because if it had rained, we were actually covered a bit, which is interesting. So if you care about that, it also helped with shade because it was extremely hot. The show was set to start at 8 p.m., but the sun was still out, and they're kind of right on that time zone line. So it was still pretty bright. It wasn't like too dark yet. And so we were still getting a bit of sun. So that helped cover that. And they had merch kind of right beside us. There was like a little merch tent thing kind of built into the wall. and that covering. So we're basically on our row. There was a merch line there. They have one on the other side at orchestra right. They also have one in the back, again, where the restrooms were. Restrooms were clean. There were plenty of restrooms. The merch lines were very long. Everybody seemed to be buying merch. So people were standing in line all the way back towards the entrances, the back of the amphitheater since it started. And the bathroom lines were not that way. So that was nice. The concessions were pretty easy to access. So overall, decent experience. The way that the seats are set up, it's like they're all connected. So it's almost like big benches, like what you see in the amphitheaters, but you have your own like little seat within that, if that makes sense. But the spacing between seats is very, very small. Thankfully, with us, we had two guys sitting to my left, no one really, like a few seats on the other side of them. And then my husband and no few people, like there weren't many people on the other side of him. So the amphitheater was not full. The seats were not completely filled. There were a lot of spots still open, probably more of those resale tickets. The amphitheater did go up into like this sort of lawn area. It's not truly a lawn, it's almost like rock seats, very far back. The stage, so it's kind of down in the pit. There's not really a bad seat necessarily from a can you see over the person in front of you, and like even if someone's standing up in the stands part where we were, there was a lot of space, height between the seats, so pretty easy to see. If people were standing, depending on your height, you may need to stand, but there's room to kind of look around. Like there were a lot there were a lot of opportunities to see, which was nice. The downside is that the screens, which I've seen at a lot of amphitheaters, like the screens are so small. If you were in the very back, you probably would not have seen much at all because Brand New didn't really use the screens. I don't think they used them at all. And if they did, it was like just a far back, zoomed out version. Where we sat, we could see the stage well as much as possible. And again, we'll get into their actual set and why that didn't matter too much, but we didn't necessarily need the screens. They would have been nice for some close-ups, but again, that wasn't even used in the set. But if you were far back, I think you would have heard well, like the sound was great, but probably wouldn't have seen much. So if you go to that venue, I would suggest maybe sitting a bit closer because you're likely going to have a better experience. In the pit section, there were seats. So the pit was all seated and people stood, but it wasn't like a traditional pit where people were like pushing to the front or anything like that. Like technically you could have bought the seat for the barricade if you wanted. And that was completely full. Like the lower sections were completely full. And it seemed like all of those people showed up. So that was really it about the venue. The merch, I didn't see very much of it. We didn't really stand in line. We are collecting posters of shows that we travel to. So we originally weren't going to get anything and then decided, you know what, we'll get a poster just because it feels like this is kind of a sort of historical moment, like maybe for the good, maybe for the bad. Like we can always throw away the poster if we need to. But the pricing on the merch was pretty decent and they had some interesting merch. I think they've always been known for having pretty good merch. One guy had a shirt on, I think it was from this merch that said, nobody wants Brand New to be dead more than Brand New wants to be dead or something like that. So it was very interesting. They kind of played into, I think, some of the hate that they have gotten and the mystery. The tour poster was a picture of them, the tour dates at the bottom, very small, and it just says FOYB. I don't actually know what that means. We were trying to figure it out. Maybe the internet can tell us. Again, there's just so much mystery to all of it. No real info online about what it is. Maybe you guys know. Maybe I'm missing something that is obvious that like fans who were deeper into their fandom back in the day would know and understand better, but I don't know. But it was interesting. So we grabbed a poster. They had a lot of other merch. They had some vinyl. If they had the vinyl for The Devil and God Are Raging Inside Me, we probably would have gotten it. It's my favorite album by them, but they did not have it. They had Daisy and I think a couple of others, but it was very quick. It was like the set had already started. The line finally had given up. I just ran, grabbed a poster, ran back to my seat. But other people seem to be getting a lot of merch. The guy beside me ended up getting a hat, a whole bag. He knew all the songs. He was really into it. So getting into the set itself, the thing I was the most curious about, which I found very interesting, was just the performance and how they approached it. So the show was set to start at 8, doors opened at 7. They ended up starting at 8:30, but there was nothing on our tickets, nothing on their marketing, on their website about an opener. I believe there probably wasn't an opener. I even looked into it a bit beforehand, even Reddit threads where people before other shows saying, is there an opener? Most people say, we don't know, maybe just get there on time. So it was kind of mysterious in terms of like, is anyone opening? Is it just brand new? Like, what's going on? I assumed it would just be brand new because, again, an opener wasn't communicated. And the late start time of the show, being an outdoor amphitheater, you would think they had to be done by like 10, 10:30, something like that. So I assumed, and this was a Sunday night. So you would think they wouldn't go super late. So 8 o'clock came around and there was really no signs of anything starting. So we were just kind of sitting there waiting, a little confused, like what's happening? Or is it starting? Is it not starting? What are we doing? And a few texts kept coming out. There were two drum sets on the stage, which also made it kind of confusing. Then lots of like guitars already set up on the stage. And that was it. No signage, nothing, just the instruments on the stage. So 8:30 rolls around and the band comes out and there's nothing, no music playing in the background. People obviously cheering, going crazy. You know, there's some smoke and stuff, but no like big drop, nothing big. They come out. I believe, and I could have this wrong, I think that the first song was Mixtape. I don't remember. I didn't take a video or anything. It was a song that we knew. But they just came out, didn't say a word, started the song. People were super into it, you know, yelling the lyrics back, very much like I assume what shows used to feel like back in the day when they were touring more frequently. Again, I've never seen them before, but it seems like fans were kind of right into the rhythm of it and what they were doing in terms of the chants or what parts of the song because they're screaming versus just singing themselves. Everyone was standing. You know, people were very into it. No dramatic stuff happening, right? Just very much a concert everyone's into, everyone's excited. The entire set, they weren't using the screens. So the way that they had the lighting set up, and I kind of saw this, I guess, in the clips that I have seen from the show, it's almost like they intentionally set it up to where you can't see the band members' faces, especially Jesse. The lights were behind them and they had a pretty cool light show. They had this like light that almost looked like a water show thing that was like kind of going in circles and then the light would follow. And so they would have like rainbow lights and or blue lights, like all these different light stuff happening on this big column or two columns, which is pretty cool. But then they also had these big kind of spotlights, which you usually see some bands will use them or they use them every now and then like behind the stage, but they had those pretty much the whole show. So if you were close, you probably could see the band members' faces, Jesse's face. Where I was, you could see the silhouettes. You couldn't really see their face. And they had it set up, it seemed like intentionally to be that way. It seems like, and this is what I kind of got from how they're announcing their tour and just their comeback, I guess, as a whole, is that they're really trying to separate like the music from the artist and just let the music be what the music is. Digging into their recap a bit, that episode that I did, it seems like that's kind of what they have done really since their start in the first album that they put out. I would love your opinions on that if you have been around in the scene a little bit longer and were around for maybe pre 2017 and everything that happened there. They very much did not like, there was no like, hey, Atlanta, like, we're excited to be here. We're brand new. Like, there wasn't really a lot of that. It was very much just playing the music, play the songs for the majority of the set, the lights behind, not a lot of spotlights on them, but their silhouettes kind of more so highlighted than their faces. Their sound was incredible. I mean, Jesse's voice is amazing live. Like, it was great. Exactly what you would expect it to be. The energy was great. The other band members were really into it. I'm still very confused about the two drum thing. Maybe that's been around this whole time. I don't know. But that was confusing. There were two drummers and they would sometimes both play in a song together, or like one would play, then the other would play. I'm still very confused. But the guitarist, the bass, like they were all really into it. There was the piano keyboard in the back. So the music sound was really great. and they seemed really into it and put on a decent show. Like the performance, I guess, was very much music forward, which I think makes sense with their music and style of music. They're, they would move on stage or kind of get into the music during some of the kind of music riffs that were in between all the lyrics, but they weren't necessarily like doing huge things on the stage. And again, there was no, beyond the light show behind them, there wasn't really a lot of extra stuff thrown into the performance beyond the songs, which was kind of nice, I think. Makes sense, matches their style a lot more. They did get to a point where they kind of went off the stage probably around like 9:45, close to 10. I thought maybe this was going to be their like encore. I assumed they would be done at 10, 8:30 to 10, 90-minute set. They left the stage for just a second, came back, and then brought out like stools and sat for a few songs, and encouraged the crowd to sit. So most of the crowd sat at that point. That was the most like talking that Jesse did. And it was Father's Day on Sunday that we went. And so he, thanked everyone for being there. We wouldn't be able to do this without you. He did make a statement, which I thought was fascinating, where he was like, we've been doing this for, I think, like 25 years or 20 years. Thank you. We could only do it because of you. Like, didn't acknowledge the hiatus, which was interesting. It's like, have they still just been doing it? Like, can we say that? But that was really interesting. I found that it was like, oh, are you going to acknowledge any of this? Like that was what I was most curious about. It's like, what are you going to say? Like, how are you going to address this? Are you going to talk about it? Are you not? Like the people that are here may not care to hear anything. I would like to. I'd be curious about it, but I don't know. But they didn't. And then he said, Happy Father's Day, and talked about his kids. So I think he has two kids. So he's like, becoming a father was the best thing that ever happened to me. I'm grateful this is my life or whatever. So he acknowledged that, which is interesting. And that was pretty much it. So didn't really say much else. And then played the songs and went on. During that part, as things did get quiet, we did have a guy, it was like a group of guys behind us. And it was a non-smoking show. If you also hate smoking, then you understand how tricky these shows can be, especially outdoor shows. But it was technically non-smoking. Everyone was vaping, of course, but the guys behind us, they were smoking like cigarettes and other things, and just like kind of hiding it or whatever. So very annoying to begin with. But at this point in the show, I guess they were high plus drunk, and they did start yelling, and he started yelling, Jesse, Lacey likes to F children, you like to F children, like stuff like that, which I was curious if we would see any kind of backlash to that, like anything said. I assumed maybe not inside the show, just because everyone paid to be there and seemed to be there for the music, even their whole group. I don't know where this guy was really coming from, but he yelled a bit. No one really responded to it. We were far enough away. I doubt the band even heard it. But that was kind of interesting, a little frustrating, especially with the language and the words he was using. But, people have their feelings and experiences with that. So they are not addressing it. Is that fair? I don't know. It's a debate. But that would happen just for a little bit during that section of the show, and then pretty much stopped after that. So that was a bit of a quieter part of the show. Again, they played a few songs seated. I can't remember the exact ones because, again, I didn't take notes or record a lot or anything to jog my memory. But I ended up knowing a lot more of the songs than I thought I did. And, that part of it was fun, but I don't remember where they all fit into the set. So after they did those few songs seated, I believe like one of the songs maybe led to them kind of standing up. Like they didn't really take a pause too much. And then at another point, I think they played like another song more active. They never left for like a full encore, but I think that they did go off the stage a little bit once and come back again. They came back and they played it. This was around probably close to 10:30. So we're about 2 hours into the set at this point when they played Jesus Christ, my favorite song. We got really into it. I assumed that was the end, That was where they were ending it. So they played that song. Great. Everyone was into it. And then the first like strike of lightning, because it was supposed to storm that evening. So lightning struck, and then within like a few seconds later, there was thunder. They didn't shut down the show with like the lightning, but they were playing another song. And I don't know how many they played after that, because at that point I was like, you know what? I've heard all the songs that I really care about. I don't want to get stuck in the storm. So my husband and I like left. So we just went ahead and left, got to our car before it started raining. But they did play, I think, a much older song, like what they were playing after Jesus Christ. I didn't know that song. So I'm guessing it was a bit of a deeper cut, like through their older albums, but people were super excited about it. So whatever it was, apparently it was meaningful. And then after that point, I have no idea what happened because we weren't there. So I don't know if I doubt they said much else, just because of how they really approached the different stages of the set. Um, Up until that point, I would assume that they just kind of left it with a thank you, good night, goodbye. If you were at the show or been to other shows and they said more, please share. Because I think I understand their approach, and in some ways I appreciate it. I think it's, as a fan of music, it's always complicated because a lot of musicians and artists are not necessarily the best people. And so it's sometimes hard to love music so much and not necessarily like, love, or even want to support the artists that put out the music. And how do you separate that? Can you separate that? Is it okay to separate that? Same is true of like physical art, paintings, things that we love, like movies, right? There's so much that you may love about what an artist produces in the art without necessarily appreciating or wanting to support the artists themselves. And it's really tricky and messy. And in this case, I think a lot of fans have tried to just separate the two because they love the art so much. And it seems like Brand New's leaning into that and just letting the art, letting the music be the music, kind of giving it to the fans and not necessarily centering themselves as artists there. They did do like the whole, like, these are the band members. He very quickly, like, I think said everyone's names. I don't know if he ever said his own. Like, again, it was very kind of mumbled and quick and fast. They didn't really bring a lot of attention to that, which I think was interesting. I still think, though, as I'm not a huge fan. I wouldn't call myself like a huge fan from the past. Honestly, with Jesus Christ, I always thought that that was like Radiohead or some other band. For the longest time, I've been listening to that song a lot, and I never really knew who sang it because I never really looked into it. It's not something I typically do when I'm streaming music. I can't say that like I'm a huge fan. I do like their music, and the more that I listen to it, the more I really do like it. And I probably would have been a big fan if I would have maybe gone down that rabbit hole back in the day. So I wasn't part of the even the controversy and all the things that had happened. I didn't know that these things had happened because I'd never really gotten into it. And so doing the recap and kind of learning a lot more, it is interesting to try to put myself in those shoes of what would I have thought, or how would I approach them if I had been around at that time? What would I think about it now? Like, if I was around and part of the scene at that point, like, I don't know. And if I was more deeply a fan, like, how would I think about this? Would I be more torn? Would I be very pro to separate and enjoy the music? Would I be very anti the band? Like, I don't know because I'm not there. And I'm curious how you feel. And I understand, I think, all the sides of how people feel about it. As someone who is sort of an outsider coming in, and someone who just appreciates music and appreciates relationships to the bands themselves with the audience, I think that's something really special in the emo or punk, pop punk, all these spaces. The music is meant to be vulnerable, and a lot of fans connect because they connect to the lyrics, they connect to the music. And so there is this kind of intimate relationship between the bands and the fans, which you experience at shows and makes those so much more special as well. I wish that they would just come out and just talk about it. Like, I wish that Lacey, I wish he would do an interview, with someone he trusts, and would just talk about it, because it seems like he's likely made changes in his life. Like, he's, a dad, he's been married, like, has a family. Likely and there's not repeat offenses here, right? There's not allegations of ongoing problems after that period of time. So has that really been made right? Like, has he changed? What has that looked like? I kind of wish he would just talk about it. I think it would honestly make a lot of it better, just because I think it's hard for people to like truly get past it. In his own words, like, I'm glad that you can forgive. I'm only hoping that in time you can forget, right? Like he wants that from his own music, and but then not, it's like, well, forgetting, I think, and getting past something isn't just about ignoring it and pretending it's not there. I think it does take a bit of like communication, and like, you need to talk about it, right? Not that he owes anyone an explanation necessarily. He doesn't have to, but I do think it would make a lot of things better. And I was hopeful, maybe, I assume that he wasn't talking about it in the show, because I would assume that if he did talk about it with these sets and with this tour, people would be sharing that more. I think people aren't really sharing much because they're afraid of the backlash. And I think there's just not a lot to share. It's just the music, and the music is still good, and the performance is still good, and the fans are still having a good time at the show. But there's really not much more to it than that. I'm curious if they decide, because I can't imagine that they're doing this tour without anything to follow. It seems like a kickoff to being back. Maybe they'll just tour as brand new with all their old music. It seems like maybe they're setting the stage to release new music. You kind of need to talk about this before the new music. My husband had a theory that it seems like maybe they're feeling out like the receptiveness of fans like to them first. So maybe after the tour, and seeing like if fans are open to that relationship again, I guess, like maybe then they'll come out and talk about it. I hope so. And I hope it's good, just because I do think it could be really helpful. I think we live in such an age, and even in, those 2010s era of like canceling people, like there's no room like for mistakes that you make. And in some cases, I think that is true. Like some mistakes, like you need to be held accountable. Like there needs to be consequences to actions that you take when you harm other people. And that is true. There's also room for people who, especially, are young, and vulnerable themselves, to change and to make changes in their lives, and adapt and become mature, and make up for their wrongdoings, and then create a place of respect and safety for other people, and truly, truly acknowledge the harm that they've done in that process. Like there is room for that. As human beings, I think we deserve the chance for that. And so I hope that that has been the case for them, or him especially. And then I hope that he talks about it, so that there is some room for that too. I think that would be a helpful conversation, especially in this scene, in this space where, unfortunately, a lot of the actions that he took, like there's a lot of that. There's a lot of bad stuff that happens within the music scene through artists, but also with fans. There are a lot of mistakes that people have made, repeat mistakes where people have hurt people. We've all done that in some way. And so having the ability to see someone that you respect, like an artist that you had loved, that had, let you down deeply, and their actions had done harm, like, could they change and make things right and live a different life and create safety for people moving forward? I think that would be really nice to see. So maybe we'll get that. I don't know. Didn't necessarily get that in the tour, but it was a good night. It was fun. I'd be lying if I said it wasn't. I'm not going to lie. It was still a little awkward and uncomfortable. I think I took one video or two videos of Jesus Christ, one of like one part that I like, and then my husband and I singing it as like a little memory to hold on to, and posted it on my stories, and just didn't tag them or anything. There's still a bit of a, I don't want to be too closely associated with you feeling that I have personally. And I think a lot of fans probably have as well. But I'm so curious of what's coming next. And my curiosity, I think, just has me hooked more than anything. So I'm interested. I'm curious. I was part of this technically. And again, I'd be lying if I said I wouldn't go to another show. Probably wouldn't pay full price, obviously. Like the $10, it was 100% worth it. $22 for my husband and I to go to a show. Then we spent maybe, I think, like $25 on a poster and $10 on waters. So overall, not so bad. But it was a good show if you like the music. If you don't like the music, you'd probably be bored because, again, there's not a lot of stuff, extras that are there. If you've gone to the tour in a different venue, in a different space, if you had a different experience, if it was the set was even different, maybe they did talk a bit more, like please share those experiences. I'm very interested in what's happening. And then we'll keep an eye out. And if that interview with Jessie Lacey comes out, I mean, I can do it. It's not really the greatest space for it. We don't have the biggest audience, but I mean, we have nothing to lose either. So I'd be interested in having that conversation. And again, just really being open about like what has been happening behind the scenes, behind the doors, like these last 8 years. Like you're back, but the last 8 years have been quiet, right? So what has been going on? And how are things actually different moving forward? You're back into the spotlight. Is that good? Are you prepared? Like, what does support look like? How are you being honoring to like your own children, and how are you raising them differently than what you had, experienced, and some of those worldviews, mindsets, things that you believed at that time that allowed you to harm other people? Like, how is that different now? With as least amount of judgment as possible, but also with some accountability, because that's really important. So we could talk about that all day, and I'd be curious what you think. If you hate me now because I went to the show, I'm sorry that I let you down. I don't think not any of you really have that kind of relationship with me necessarily. I think it just feels a little sneaky to do it and not talk about it when this whole podcast is about experiences within the scene and learning and experiencing different parts of the scene than maybe I had before. And so I wanted to be open and honest and share just the real thoughts that I have and my real experience, if you were curious. And if you went to the show and you loved it and you want a space to talk about that, that's okay. I think it's okay to say you love the show. And also, there is still some conflict in your mind. And if there's no conflict in your mind, okay. I think that's interesting as well. I don't know if I agree with that necessarily. I do think it's complicated as a woman, especially. But if you don't believe that, I guess that's your experience. Maybe think about it a little bit more and still believe there should still be some desire somewhere to have some conversation and true accountability, meaning we can talk about it and see where the growth has happened and not just completely ignore it with Jessie Lacey moving forward. I think we can create space for a new chapter. We can create space for change to have happened and for there to be some reconciliation with fans while still holding accountability. Like that seems like a compromise that most people can agree with. I believe deeply. And then also making sure that in that those who had harm done to them like aren't just ignored either, and that there has been some sort of retribution or reconciliation, like something there with the person that has done the harm, apologies that are heartfelt and meaningful, like something, right? There's got to be something, because change is great, but there also should be some accountability for the harm that has been done. Maybe not to chain you down for the rest of your life and you can never have a good life again. I don't think that's true, but making sure that there is a little bit of accountability there is important. So again, could talk about it all day. I'm going to stop. But if you're interested in diving deeper into that, go to that deep dive on Brand New, or we can talk through comments here. Happy to have that discussion. I'm curious of your thoughts. Again, I'm not an expert on this. This is not just me and my opinions only. This is a dialogue. This is a conversation. This is meant to be collaborative with you guys. That is the whole reason this podcast exists. And if you want to come on and talk about, if you have a lot of thoughts, if you have had deep experiences with this fan group and or other bands, or you're like, there's other controversies you're not covering as much, and we should talk about it because they're also really important at this time, please check the show notes, email me. I would love to have you on. Like that is always an open invitation. I'm curious. I would just ask, like, there's some respect somewhere, but if you have things that you're like, hey, I really want to discuss this and I think this is important and I have something I really want to share, please do. You can email me. I'd love to have you on. We can talk about it, open up a dialogue. And next week, we will be moving back into some of our deep dives. So this is a bit of a, we've taken a bit of a detour with all of these show recaps. I've been on a show marathon recently. There's been a lot of shows. And so we're going to get back to some of our deep dives, and then we will go into more recaps as future shows come up, because I've got Dashboard with Goo Goo Dolls. We've got My Chemical Romance coming up. We've got Sleep Token coming up. That we'll debate whether or not they're considered emo in any way. And then I think that that's all that. Oh, then we have the Use coming up again, and then Emo is Not Dead tour. So those are my next round of shows. And so we'll definitely be getting into some pre-prep for some of those, but also recaps as they happen. And then some of our other emo bands. And then we'll go past that and figure out what direction that we want to take it. If there's a band you want covered, again, email me, let me know, comment it, whatever, put it in a review. I would love to know what you want to hear, what you think that we should be learning more about, who you think is underappreciated that needs to be talked about more. And yeah, hope to see you there in our next class.